With the price on everything skyrocketing, whether that's housing or food or medical care, an increasing number of retirees are considering retiring abroad, leaving the United States and moving overseas to retire because, like me, they're scrolling through Instagram and they see that they can buy a villa in Portugal that's just been renovated for $125,000. And your mind begins dreaming of retiring by the sea with wonderful health care for like half or a fourth of the cost of retiring in the United States. I understand the appeal, and in fact, there are a lot of great benefits to retiring abroad, but there are also some complications. So in today's video, I want to give you 5 things you need to consider before deciding to move abroad. And the 5th thing we're going to explore, if you don't get right, can end up costing you $50,000 a year in penalties, thanks to Uncle Sam. But first, my name's Kevin Lum. I'm a certified financial planner, and this channel is dedicated to helping 1 million people retire without worry. So the first thing you need to do before selling all your belongings and moving halfway across the world is you need to do a trial run. You need to move to the country, or maybe even choose a couple of countries and move to for as long as you can on a travel visa, up to 90 days in some cases. Get an Airbnb and pretend that you're a local. Root yourself in the local community, walk to the local market, do all the things that you would do if you lived there. Maybe even try to see if you could get a doctor's appointment or visit the local government offices. Like, see exactly what it's like to live your life day in and day out in this country. Because living someplace full-time and taking a vacation, as you well know, are not the same thing. And often you'll encounter challenges, whether it's the local government or the local healthcare system, that you just don't, it's hard to understand if you're just visiting. But once you change your lens and you think about what it's like if you were actually living here full time, you begin to see and notice things that you didn't notice before. Now, in some ways, it may exceed your expectations, but in other ways, it may at least help to give you a proper perspective on what it's like to be a resident in whatever your chosen destination is. So the first step you need to do is just take a trial run and see what it's like to live there. Okay, so now you've decided that you're going to live abroad. You did the trial run and you are still committed to moving. The next step is going to be getting a residency visa. And this is not going to be a walk in the park. You'll probably need to get an expert to help you walk through this process, because each country has its own requirements and it's going to take you at a minimum a few months to sort through everything. And you want to really do your research and make sure you're properly prepared, because the last thing you want to do is get halfway through the process, spend all sorts of time and money, and then realize you're missing out on one key step. Now, in some countries, you may be able to apply for what's called a golden visa. If you're going to invest assets in a foreign country, they'll at times have a streamlined process to help you avoid some of the bureaucratic headaches and the hoops that you typically would have to jump through. So depending on your assets and your net worth, you may be able to get a golden visa, which is going to make your life a bit easier, but often requires an investment of somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000. And some of the golden visa programs have begun to shut down or begin to tighten the requirement. The other consideration when moving abroad is taxes. As a U.S. citizen, as long as you're not renouncing your U.S. citizenship, you're still going to have to file a tax return in the United States. You're probably going to have to file a tax return in the country you're living in. And depending on the situation, the state, and how tied you are to it, you may still have to file taxes in the state you are from if you still have some connection to that state. Now, the good news is you shouldn't have to pay a double tax. So if you're doing some work in a foreign country and you're taxed by that country, the United States has a number of treaties and tax credits to keep you from being double taxed. But it gets a little bit complicating depending on which country you're moving to. Some countries won't tax Social Security income, others will. Some countries, I'm guessing they won't be countries you're retiring to, but some countries you're barred from receiving Social Security income while living there. And so you want to make sure that you get a tax expert who understands not just taxes for expats, that's kind of a given, but you also want to make sure you find a tax expert that it works with expats who live in that particular country. So, for example, that works with expats living in Mexico, or expats living in Israel, or expats living in Portugal, because each country has its own little kind of nuances, and you just want to make sure that you are following all the different steps to make sure there's no penalties or fees. And if you follow everything right and you have an expert working with you, it won't be that big of a situation. But if you're missing filing deadlines, you're not filing properly, it can end up being a real headache. So you want to just think about taxation and make sure you have a professional who can help you navigate that whole situation. Now, the fourth thing you want to think about is healthcare expenses. Now, while it's true that healthcare will often be cheaper when you're living abroad, you need to understand that Medicare Part A will not cover you when you're no longer living in the United States. And so before you move, you want to begin planning for your healthcare expenses. There are different types of policies you can purchase, from either short-term or longer-term guaranteed policies for people who are living abroad. But you want to do that due diligence before you leave the country. And in some cases, you may be able to get local health insurance after a certain period of time. And so you just need a policy to kind of bide your time. But as you know, healthcare is going to be one of the biggest expenses in your retirement years, and you don't want to play around with it. Most experts say that before you move, you want to make sure you have your healthcare insurance lined up. So maybe buy some private insurance, a short-term policy or a longer-term policy, and then once you're in the country of wherever you're moving to, you may be able to qualify for either the government programs or you may be able to qualify for their private insurance, which can often be much cheaper than insurance in the United States. But you're going to have that gap period that you're going to want to make sure you have solid coverage for. And finally, and this is the part that makes me break out in hives just a little bit, but there are some really strict requirements around reporting money that you have in foreign bank accounts. And if you get this wrong, there can be some really stiff penalties. So if you have more than 10,000 in a foreign bank account, you're going to have to fill out the FBAR, Foreign Banks and Financial Accounts form with the Department of Treasury. So essentially it's a way to keep people from trying to hide money in foreign bank accounts. So if you hold in excess of $10,000 in a foreign bank account, you just need to file that form with the Department of Treasury. But then there's another level. If you have over $400,000 in assets, it's actually, if you have $600,000 at any time during the year or $400,000 at the end of the year, along with your taxes, you have to file Form 8938, letting the IRS know that you have these assets in either a foreign stock market, a foreign bank account, or wherever it might be. And if you don't file that form in a timely manner, there is a $10,000 penalty. And then for each month that you delay, there's an additional $10,000, up to $50,000 for each reporting period that you miss. So if you have significant assets overseas and you don't report it to the IRS, you could have significant fines and penalties that you're going to be left with. So if you remember nothing else from this video, you need to find a really experienced tax professional who works with expats that can help you navigate the complexities of living overseas and making sure you get all the right forms filled out, because otherwise it can end up costing you a fortune and can eat into your retirement nest egg. So just make sure you're following all the proper banking and tax requirements to help you avoid that. So in conclusion, retiring overseas can offer you some incredible benefits and can allow you to live a much better retirement or have a higher quality of standard for a lower cost than retiring in the United States. But before you decide to make that leap, you need to do some very careful planning and do some trial runs. Make sure you actually like the country you're living in. Make sure you're okay being that far away from friends and family, and you can afford the plane tickets back and forth and all those different things. So be sure before you make that leap to do your due diligence. And there are a ton of videos on YouTube, and there's some great financial advisors and tax professionals who specialize specifically working with expats. And so before you make that plunge, reach out to someone, begin to do that pre-planning, and good luck. And as always, thanks for watching. If you like this content, click the like button, subscribe, ding that bell, and then also leave a comment, ask a question. If you've lived overseas or considered living overseas, you're going to retire overseas, let me know about your plan, the things you've done, what worked, what didn't work. Go ahead and put that in the comments below as well. Thanks for watching.